my favorite version of deals are, which is win-win relationships. They're tangible ways for people to get so much. The whole idea behind widespread just sharing your solutions and having an ROI simply from throwing as many messages out there is no longer viable or valid. Now looking back, not be as excited about some of the successes because in reality, they really didn't lead to the places that I felt like they could lead to.
Welcome to Mission Activated, where we bring you the stories of individuals who've awakened to their true purpose and are living a life of passion, impact, and alignment. I'm Aveline Clark, your host, and I believe that when you're on mission, everything falls into place. Here, we share the journeys of those who've discovered their unique path and embraced their soul's calling. It's not just about making money in life and in business, it's about making a difference, living on purpose, and inspiring yourself and others along the way. Let's get to it. My next guest is someone I met a few years ago and instantly connected with. He's got an incredible mind. He has a PhD in materials science and engineering from Texas University in the US, and he runs a business called Freefuse. And Mike is a person who's always looking for connections, whether that's humans, technology, and everything in between. Hence his PhD in materials science and engineering. An amazing guy, and what he's creating at the moment in the world is very exciting, and he talks more about that in this conversation. And things are always evolving and moving with him. And I love the way that he explores opportunities and just goes out there and finds ways to create the new thing that's needed, which is really 6-star. It's really him being on a purposeful mission. It was a great chat. Mike's such an intelligent and interesting person, and it's a good one. So enjoy this one with Mike Liu. Hello, Mike. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing great. Was doing pretty differently last week, trying to dodge fires and things like that, and understanding the world of evacuation notices or, fake ones that actually get sent out by the county. But other than that, I'm good. I learned about a lot of new technologies that I can use to find natural disaster informations and things like that. And so I learned a lot. And, I felt really good being able to help the, fellow folks that, live in the city and being able to house a few folks. And it just was a very nice way to see that folks really want to come together in these types of situations. And I was very happy to see that we as a group and as a city are people who want to help each other. And that was really special to me. And, I obviously no one wants to experience natural disasters in any capacity, but if there was a silver lining, it was that it really showed me how much care that people put into being, citizens of a place and really caring about their local community. And that's something I really will hold with me for a very long time.
Thank you, Mike. So obviously you're talking about LA. We're recording this just after the LA fires, and I love that you said that. I've interviewed firefighters in the past. I've interviewed people who have lost everything twice. In Australia, we're a very fire-prone country. I don't live in a fire-prone area, but I've interviewed people who are. And what you just said then is the most common thing or the theme that comes out. And I love that you experience that connection and the sense of community and how people really care. And that's probably something new for the city of LA. It's probably never been something like that that's forced people to come together in that way. We could do a whole podcast just on this one topic, and I don't want to divert from, you, because this is about you, but I want to thank you for bringing that up, and also that it highlights the kind of person you are and the care that you have, and also your experience in connecting with people in your business world and the community aspect, and how you've obviously used that in real life in the past week. So well done you.
Well, thank you. And I think like the actual philosophy of how I like to express myself as a person and how I like to express who I am in terms of like business being, the leader of our organization is really about how much do you really know are things that are going to be, not just, those sort of, kind of like cheesy throw-ins you might have as like something you have for employees, but do you fundamentally actually know the people that you're working with? And more importantly, how are you going to create an environment that gets them to be excited about coming in every day, right? And I think that there's been always the challenge of how much leeway do you give to people? How much is it that you want to help them, grow in their own roles? How much responsibility do you need to give to them? And then outside of that, how much do you work with people who are partners? And what was really nice about my own recent experience is that I've been really working heavily in terms of our partnerships and how we've grown through that channel so heavily and figuring out what my favorite version of deals are, which is win-win relationships. And when you have a win-win relationship that you can build and you can grow and you can see that there are tangible ways for people to get so much out of it just from participating, and you can be able to facilitate that. I've always believed that those are some of the strongest relationships that you can have. And if you really think about a lot of how we as people are, and even going back to this whole communal aspect of what was going on with the fires, like people really have the opportunity to build each other up. And I think if you actually build in the way where we can support each other and even incentivize that, I think that a lot more people would more harmoniously work together and find ways to work together that can really be beneficial to all parties. And I've always just believed in trying to figure out what are the best ways for me to do that and how best can I facilitate that myself. And more recently, I've been spending a lot of time connecting dots between organizations of people who had never met before. And now we're actually creating solutions that are going to be solutions that we can all combine together into one new offering that is greater than the sum of its parts. And so I've had such a joy going through that process.
Oh, wow. There's so much in that, Mike. And for the listeners, I hope you understand that you're probably getting now why I wanted Mike to come on the podcast and speak, and also why, Mike, you and I have been connected for the years that we have, and what drew me to you and your ethics and your values, and how you hold yourself and what you believe in, and it's always about humanity effectively, and it's about how we can help each other. And I want to now take a little bit of a segue and ask you, so what is the mission that you're on right now, and how are you activated on that mission?
I would say that in the early days, and I don't think it's unreasonable if you're starting something out for the very first time. I don't think it's unreasonable to admit that your first years are there for you to survive, like to basically figure out if you have something that is worthwhile to pursue. That's kind of the first leg, is to believe in that thing. And I think the second leg of becoming, the person that you can be across this journey is to believe in the person that you're becoming, right? And I think that the belief in your idea or your product you're bringing to market for a lot of folks happens first, because you can't really believe in your ability to lead sometimes, at least in the founders that I've talked to and business owners, until you believe that your concept can outweigh your capabilities. Then you realize you actually enhance said capabilities because the product was actually developed by you, the other folks you work with on your team, the fellow founders, even advisors. And when you start to realize that you are also one of those hubs that brings all of those things together, you start to take more ownership of it. And so, in terms of my own mission now, my mission is to become as much of a hub and allow our technology to become as much of a hub as I possibly can. Because what I found is the way that people are doing business with people is different. The way that people are actually communicating with other people is different. And you throw in some of the words like community, and you throw in some of the words like, kind of, some people like to do more exclusive setups of like, having people, be some level of aptitude for joining a place or have some level of dollar amount to paying in to join a specific club. Like there's always been structures like that. But I think that more so in today's day and age, the actual way that we're exploring the world is through these sort of very targeted communities of people that we feel comfortable enough to spend every day to some degree, 15 to 20 minutes. And it's allowed folks to actually feel comfortable because they can feel famous to their, 15 other people. And I don't mean that in sort of the way of like, you should be glamorous. It's more like you have 15 people that you consistently maybe spend a lot of time with. And I remember this was a concept I heard from a podcaster that I listened to online. And they brought up the subject that in the future, people will be famous to, their 15 other people they spend their time with. And I'm finding that more so than ever, we're taking more guidance and, we're taking more of a direction from the folks who are in sort of that core 15 or so people that we spend our time with. And it's because of that, that when we want to communicate with other people, we have to understand that they're getting the recommendations and suggestions from a similar group of folks. And we need to understand how to communicate with these little pockets of people, because I think that the whole idea behind widespread just sharing your solutions and having an ROI simply from throwing as many messages out there is no longer viable or valid. And when we brought in the idea of partnerships with folks, we've actually done it in such a way where we architect a win-win, even with someone who doesn't even have necessarily a product or service to offer, even if it's just somebody who wants to redistribute. How can we still support you in your goals? Maybe you want to have a specific role or some specific career development that you're trying to do. How can we help you? Right? How can we help
Mm,
you achieve
mm.
those goals? And so for us, like the way for us to not just kind of penetrate the community, but the way for us to be a part of said community is to be a member in some way. And how do you be a member? I'm going to make a joke because that's a insurance company out here, but they always like to say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And I like that adage. I just wish that State Farm hadn't actually pulled out all those insurance policies from the people in the Pacific Palisades. But that's like another conversation entirely.
Yeah. You are clearly activated on this mission. And I just want to bring up for the listeners, you're actually the CEO of a company called Freefuse. And yet you're talking here about connecting communities and building partnerships and creating value and organic, you know, growth through that mechanism. And I love that you're talking about what you're activated on and the mission that you're on, rather than just spewing out, what my company does and what product I sell. And that's why you're here. And this is what I just love, about these conversations and people like yourself, Mike, because what you're doing is actually helping people. It's helping the planet and you're growing. There's this constant evolution, right? You're always looking at, what is needed now, next. I'd love to learn though about the journey you've been on that's brought you to where you are today. Because you didn't wake up one day and say, "Oh, I'm just going to start," bringing communities together as well as being the CEO of Freefuse and serving all my clients. So, tell me about the journey, and feel free to start from as way back as you like, and bring us to where you are today, please.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that every good journey starts with a place that, maybe as early as childhood or, as early as someone can remember, there's kind of like that sort of memory in their mind about what it is that they maybe wanted to do. Some people wanted to become astronauts, some people wanted to become firefighters. You go to the career day, you hope for, things like that. There was always an inkling of mine, even just, being a child. Like my family's always had like entrepreneurial activities that they've done. So my grandfather had like a very large and prosperous like palm oil business, I think, when they were in Jakarta in Indonesia. Because my family, while being Chinese, has like actually been like they had emigrated to Indonesia before, having a portion of them relocate to the United States and immigrate there. So like, I've seen kind of that whole process, and both sides of the family, there's long, sort of long lines of people who have all been doing entrepreneurial things for such a long time. Very, and, they've been very successful in where they were at. And of course, that led to a portion of our families on both my mom and dad's side. They didn't know each other at the time, but they ended up all like moving over to Southern California and starting a life there. And I think that there's a certain spirit that comes with wanting to build something. And I think that my core thing that I've done throughout my life is being a builder. It shows up as an engineering major. I've been in, material science engineering. I've been in a number of different different new projects. And what I've always tried to do is push the envelope to what it is that I'm doing as something completely new, something completely different that I can go and kind of put my stamp on. And it's not really about planting my flag anywhere else that, is going to make a name for myself. The idea was to push the boundaries of something because that's really what advances something beyond where it was. And I just like to explore that, right? Like if there is a specific thing that I enjoy, and I like to say this about myself, and I truly do believe it's a skill, but I feel like I can see something and how things connect before the people who I talk to can even ever perceive where it is that I'm going with something. A lot of the times in the early days when I was linking up connections together, a lot of people would never even think, oh, it would very much appear that, like, I can understand what you're talking about. But what I found was a lot of people after the fact would say, well, I actually never knew what you were really trying to aim at to talk to us about and linking us together, but now I see it. And over time, now people have just taken introductions and meetings just because they know I wouldn't actually make a bad recommendation. They're more trusting of, oh, hey, I understand that, whoever you're recommending, you really think that these people are going to be impactful. And so the journey for me to get from where I am there to who I was then is kind of like riddled with a number of areas of where I've wanted to build. I've wanted to build community, whether that was through undergrad, whether that was through grad school, like kind of, groups and bringing people together and just generally knowing as many folks as I possibly could, because all I've learned in a number of these engineering courses is that I don't really know that much about anything. And the best part about it is if you can leverage the intelligence and the know-how of a bunch of other smart individuals who are way better than you at the things you're bad at. Well, I mean, there you go. And so I've learned to really understand over time where my strengths have been, where I needed to go and delegate, where I needed to understand if I wanted to build something, that I truly felt proud of, I need the right people around me because I don't know how to do everything. And I think the growth of who you are as a person starts with, I need to do everything because I can't pay for people to do it in the beginning. To, oh, I need to let go of certain things I thought I was doing well because I don't do them very well. And I need to actually have the capability to allow people to make mistakes, to grow, to experiment, and then more importantly, to encourage them regardless of outcome, but obviously always making sure that process is the same. And if the process is yielding bad results continuously, then let's go back and look at process. And I think the culmination of all the life experiences that I've had, from whatever failures in terms of certain areas and whatever successes in certain areas, I think certain things I would be more excited about now thinking back on it, knowing what contributions they would have in my life, even the failures, than I did at the time. And I would honestly, now looking back, not be as excited about some of the successes because in reality, they were fine at the time and they were exciting, but they really didn't lead to the places that I felt like they could lead to. So I think everything is always just kind of like that, hindsight 2020 type of notion. But I think if I were to talk about the overall, career arc or trajectory, it was somebody going from somebody who felt like they knew everything because they would be willing to outwork you, to be willing to spend crazy hours like trying to figure out the most creative ways to get something done, to someone who's a little bit more, kind of sure of themselves and certain and a lot more measured, and therefore does not need to spend crazy painstaking time because that's really not the best use of my time. Right. And so now I've started to learn those things and grow. And the more intentional I've been about that, the better I've been able to build. And at the end of the day, that's really what I've been trying to accomplish as a high level item overall. And the mission is, of course, to continue obviously helping the organization scale and succeed, but more so to be able to connect as many people that I feel like share the same values and beliefs and the same type of, desire to, build up really important technologies for their audiences as much as I care to do so myself. And I just, wanted to pick as many people who were hungry like that and people I respected intelligence wise. And they became a number of our partners in the early days. So that's kind of how I built intentionally.
That's brilliant. What was the initial intention for Freefuse when you first created it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always like to, I always find this, terminology to be odd because one, whenever you say captive anything, right? the only positive captive, story, sort of sounding thing is like when you captivate somebody, right? And that's more of a positive thing. It's captivating, it's exciting, right? But then there's this word about captive audience that I've always felt was really, really weird, right? You have a captive audience, so it's like, so you have a bunch of people like against their will that you're making them do something with, right? But
Yeah.
funny enough, I had a built-in audience that I had when I was a teaching assistant, and coming out of the whole pandemic times and having people go back into the classroom, we had a number of students who ended up like actually doing really badly because surprise, surprise, like going from Zoom back into the classroom and then having these weird like on and off hours for people, not exactly conducive for learning. It's like you can't kind of dip your feet into like halfway trying to do something and then halfway trying to like sort of keep everybody separate. Like it really confused a lot of people. People were kind of like late during a lot of the times that they were trying to go to these certain blocks that we would afford to each student. So it was a very confusing time. And I understood that a lot of students is an adjustment, and a lot of students didn't do well that first semester back. So I had already been working on this idea of really utilizing the platform concept that's kind of core today, which was to basically create these individual paths of learning with micro content. And really, it was actually really about sharing information as like kind of like the high level. But the idea was to really utilize this structure just to make it kind of meet where people were, or where people, kind of are in terms of their content consumption at the time. You have like TikTok starting to get more prevalent. People can't watch videos for more than 90 seconds because for whatever reason, they can't pay attention beyond that. And so rather than trying to fight against that, which a number of, I feel like very smart people, and not to say that it was a, silly approach by any means, but you had a lot of smart people who were kind of utilizing scientific research that I feel like was not actually taken within the last 18 months to justify how it is that we needed to teach people. And what I really needed to say, and I kept arguing for, was that we're actually in a period that I think we need to kind of clear the deck in terms of like what we sort of generally know about this. And I think we need to not necessarily widely experiment, but I think we need to actually rethink about how we're going through the process of thinking about educating students in this way, especially if we're going to have this strange sort of hybrid, half like in person format. And so instead, I propose this idea of where ironically, yeah, utilizing this sort of audience of our students is about 200 students, and I started to have the idea, of course, of breaking everything down into this shorter bite-sized segment format. But of course, as I know from academia, and for those who listen to this show probably know from academia, anytime you propose something that's extra work, not a good thing, right? And so we added in AI to basically make it so that they wouldn't have to break down anything. They literally put it in our machine. It went and went and did its pathways and automatically labeled and made everything searchable and digestible. And lo and behold, the student engagement was enormous. There was 30,000 choices made in that first pilot program we ran, 200 students, and that was over 16 weeks. And it was such, I feel so grateful for the type of response we got. Students said they wanted it in all of their classes. They were wondering if, when the next program was going to be where we got this integrated. They were asking me to put it in like, hey, are you going to have this in the next classes? Like, we're going to be going into here. Can you like make sure that this is in there? And, it was such a positive response. And we bring it back to the actual people who run sort of the software deployment for the school. And funny, we're friends with these people now, but at the time they were kind of like, well, hey, we can't really integrate this because of XYZ thing. And even the department was like, no, we're going to try and make learning go back to like it was in the 80s. And I'm like, this is really counterproductive to like what it is we were able to prove and accomplish. And so after that, I said, well, clearly this actually works, and I need to go and find the right people. So we use that data, move towards, corporate training and learning and development, a lot easier of a conversation. Obviously, as time went on, and even some of those, folks like, had other use cases, we were able to expand our use and started to get used in customer success and customer engagement. And now we've really built ourselves up into more of an ecosystem type play where a number of our partners and us and we all kind of slide in together, and we've now made what I've called much more compelling offerings that are actually going to solve many problems And, philosophically, I did this because it was from a number of different books around the idea of utilizing ecosystems to drive business growth. And the principle there was really about you're actually getting people to buy into the ecosystem of offerings rather than you're actually trying to get people to buy your solution. Because I'll tell you this, I had probably, companies that were willing to, buy maybe a smaller subscription or a smaller, a way to utilizing our services. But with some of these partners, some of our deal possibilities increase like pretty much like two, three, or four times. Like the actual size of deal increased and like a much more than it ever was before. Like I had a deal that normally it probably would have been maybe a $5,000 deal, and now it's four times that amount, right? Like, and that's like already just the early results of just that particular stack of offerings. And so once I started to realize it was more about that type of arrangement to actually drive business growth, that was actually what adheres to my best skills, which is connecting people, getting creative about how we present everything, and figuring out how all the pieces fit.
There's so much in there, and it's so exciting as well. For people who are listening, I hope you're understanding what Mike's talking about. I mean, Mike, Freefuse was about this very clever technology that delivered educational content in a user decide sort of pathway. Is that the
Yep.
right way to describe it? And
Yep. Choose your own adventure.
choose your own adventure. And it was great. It is great. And what you've done is made it greater. And because you had that block or that business that kind of went, oh, if we want to go back to the 80s, you figured out how to sell it to more people by using this ecosystem concept, right?
Yep. Exactly.
How exciting. So tell me about the kind of, like, first of all, where did it start? You mentioned books. There was a couple of books you read or a book. What was that? And what was the thing that landed for you that went, oh, I can do this differently?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I would say a lot of times desire to make a change in philosophy is always typically rooted in a position of I need to save the company, or I have a moment of weakness, or I have a moment where we, are going to be, scared about like this XYZ, this or that. I think this was actually rooted more into I knew we could do more, right? Like I knew that we had like a lot of very, solid frameworks. And funny enough, like now that there are certain, sort of things that have actually, the certain markers that we normally have, or had in this year. Like for example, like there was a lot more folks who were really trying to deal more so after November 5th. Like obviously that's election season, right? And so a lot of people were really kind of like waiting to see how things were going to go before engaging us. And I totally understand that you're not sure how some lines of your business are going to be affected. But during that time where there was like, periods of time where I was saying, well, we're growing, but there's not this like it's not as much as I would have anticipated. And funny enough, like I hadn't actually been selling the product during the last election cycle, right? So I probably will be more insulated about it this next time. But at the time, I was thinking to myself like there's okay growth here, but like I really thought we had these new areas that made a lot of sense. And I really feel like we're doing a lot more with what we're doing, and we're refining the approach. And I feel like we're doing the right things, but we hadn't started to experience like what I felt like would be the trajectory that I wanted. And so instead, I kind of sat there and I said, well, what is it that some of these folks that I know, going back into the community element and going back to like, referencing folks who've done things very well, what has been successful for other people? And I started to synthesize a number of different approaches. And one time I actually had a conversation where I actually interviewed my friend Anna, who you should definitely talk to as well. She was in my cohort for Alchemist Accelerator. She's from Ukraine, excellent founder, excellent CEO, and I gave her a shout out on my profile on the end of year item the last time I posted my newsletter. And when I talked to her, she had just sold her company, and I wanted to understand about the exit. Like, what did you do? How did you how did you feel about things? And where is it that you feel like you had the most growth? And what were the areas around that you felt like, were repeatable and scalable and actually high level principle can be done by anybody? And she said, well, everything that we did that actually got us to the growth and got us to the results that we wanted happened through partnerships, right? And so when I started to look at that, that was my first foray into diving deeper. And I started to realize a lot of our partnerships were really broken. We had been giving people referral partnerships, and I realized that very quickly that the referral partnerships, if their use did not align with what their business objective was, then nothing happened. Like pretty much across the board, 100%, right? There were very few people who were willing to give a referral if it did not mean that they would be having something contribute to their business goals. And so, because of that, we said, okay, well, we have data that says people who are contributing referrals are actually people who are aiming, who are relating this to their own business objectives. Then I think we have a very, very simple way to tune this and make this a better program. And so, what I started to do was look at a few concepts of like who we should talk to back as partners. And there was a partnership from way back when that, was reached out to, or that I'd been reached out about from this group who's, doing some really great work. They're called Kailua Labs, and they do a lot of like sort of AI, sorting with respect to like being able to, find imagery and, some things like that to be able to find those in, content from video to like images and like a flip book or something like that. They're really good with like image identification and having those models built in. And we had talked about packaging our solutions together. And there was a way I thought we'd actually be able to work together in the medical space. And in fact, like there's probably even some opportunities I can share their way too as well now, from some new developments that have happened because of this whole ecosystem thing. But they brought up this really interesting application called Crossbeam. And of course, I had been somewhat familiar with Crossbeam. They had showed me it previously. I just like had to jog my memory. They had sent me, an invitation to join Crossbeam. And I was like, what is this? I don't really need another app. Well, this is annoying. But the second time I looked at it, I realized it was actually an app that was managing like how your sort of information flow and connections and like the way that you were actually interfacing and what the exchange of value has been in terms of like, commissions to you from them, commissions from us, from yourself, or commissions from them to you, and all of that in between. And I realized that this was actually what they called an application that was really focused on managing your ecosystem. And that was the first time I'd heard about it in a long time. I had read about ecosystems from 2017 when I really started to dive deep into all this, and then started to realize how powerful they were. But my idea was wrong about it. I thought making yourself or making your organization into an ecosystem was the goal. I didn't realize that ecosystems are all a part of us, and there's kind of like different sort of like micro portions that are plugged into each other. There's ecosystems that are subsets of other ones, and industries are entire ecosystems. And so like understanding how everything all played together and understanding it from that perspective, going back to the whole thinking about a biological ecosystem. I don't know if I mean, we've seen this in terms of like, things like removing a specific species from an ecosystem can destroy it completely, right? The very nature of even changing just a few things can immediately actually cause an entire couple populations to die out, right? And it's very, it's sad, obviously, when it does happen. But if you think about it as a thought exercise, it's actually pretty intriguing, right? And from that whole, sort of mentality and looking more into Crossbeam, they actually put out a book called Ecosystem Led Growth. And that ecosystem led growth book is really kind of like the product led growth version of building true ecosystems. And, it's funny because like that whole concept was, I well understood it, but like I always like to lovingly call such a book like that, or the Pendo book, right? Like I like to call those propaganda books, because in reality, you're really just trying to prove that your concept makes sense and you're trying to build your product around it. And so I really like the concepts. I built out pretty much as many different ways to utilize it as I could. And then I actually read as many books as I could around it. And the one book that really changed kind of my whole thinking and mentality around it was Design Thinking for Business Growth. And what I ended up doing was I actually created my own little sort of AI workflow, so that now I've actually developed out a way for me to insert a new partnership framework, so that every time I have the information from a call on Zoom and that has been transcribed by Fireflies, I can always add a new framework for a new partner such that it will actually reference all the partners that I've put in there previously. And now it can actually show this interconnected web, expanding web every time. So every person I bring into that, I actually get more out of it and I can give them a sense of who we are in the back end as well.
That is so cool. For people that don't understand, the AI prompting space, what you effect just I'm just going to paraphrase for these people. What Mike's done is use the power of AI to then look at all of the people he's brought into his ecosystem to actually use that collective data and knowledge to probably match them and or see how they can support other people based on all of the conversations he's had and what he's learned about each person. Is that about right, Mike?
Oh, that's exactly right. And I'll just say this, it's the ultimate conversation starter for how you want to make intros to people. Because now I actually did create multiple stacks together that went and said, hey, you're working in this financial area where you're going to go and help people have found money, and your whole like way you get paid is getting them as much found money as possible, and then them using said found money to bring on some of these other areas where we can make them even more successful and productive. Yeah, that all makes sense. So I introduced all of those guys together, and now they all work together, right? Like those are the types of things that I was able to do. And with with the AI that I created with the custom GPTs. For those of you who don't know, when you have a paid account on ChatGPT, you can actually make your own custom version of a ChatGPT, put it in with all the knowledge and information that you want to, and you could basically give it as many custom commands and things that you would want to program into it, as pretty much as wide as your imagination can go. Like I made one version where I took a way to I had a disk analysis book that I bought, and I think it was like a while back. And so I essentially like had my virtual assistant go and kind of help me with getting that up online. And essentially I was able to take that in some of that information and turn that into a framework for reading someone's disk analysis. And like, is it like probably 100% accurate? Probably not. But like, at least that's the type of idea of what you're able to accomplish with something like the tools that we have even at our disposal. So pretty great.
If you're loving this conversation and want to dive deeper into purposeful work, then it's time to thank the 6-Star Leaders community for making this episode possible. The 6-Star Leaders are a group of purpose-driven business owners committed to doing business differently by embracing their unique genius and skills to make a real impact. It's a space for learning, growth, and truly becoming empowered in everything that you do. If you're ready to discover your own 6th star, go to bit.ly/6-star community-intro and book a chat to learn more. We look forward to seeing you. Mike, I love hearing what you're talking about. I love the way your mind works and how caring and passionate you are about this constant pushing the boundary, the evolution of how to connect, but also serve more people. I mean, what you're talking about, like this, what you've been doing with ecosystems, by the sound of it, is an alternative to traditional marketing that just doesn't work for a start. And well, when I say doesn't work, for some people it doesn't work, and it's harder to make those things work. But you've also created something that just brings people together, which as human beings, we need more of this. We really do, especially in such a technologically supercharged world where we have become more disconnected than ever. So I love what you're doing. It's just brilliant. And I love that you do it with a smile on your face, right? So would you say that you're on purpose? Are you living with purpose and on path?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like the entire ethos or pathos, I always forget what is each one, meaning, but I feel like the whole idea behind what we do is really about accentuating the specific path that everybody goes down. Because whereas I feel like in a lot of other, ways to, communicate, we expect a lot of people to get one message and we expect it to, talk to the X amount of people who it adheres to, but we don't really a lot of the times understand why that message seems to adhere to people. And it was very difficult to obtain that data over time. And I'm not, going to say, pretend like we're going to have like the greatest, like, most different type of way to approach that. But I do feel like we have a unique way to approach that. And I feel like we do have a unique way to understanding how it is that people go about learning and growing and being able to go down a specific path and giving them the path that they can explore and helping to facilitate that in the most positive or the most effective way possible. So if I were to say about myself, I feel like the mission has consistently, now I wouldn't say changed, but it becomes what it needs to be for me to get the most out of my current skill set, get the most out of who we are as an organization and who we are in terms of our relationships. And the mission went from, do I have, and nobody really likes to admit this like in the early days, but I think, like I said, the mission is in the beginning. You might have a mission that once you get past the survival mode, I agree you should really lean into it heavily. And a lot of the times your mission will get you past survival mode. Because if there's something that you're ironclad needing to do and there is nothing else that will stop you from doing so, you're going to survive, right? That's why I think a lot of people focus on that, but I don't want to disparage people who are just trying to feel like their product or their service or whatever it is needs to take 3 or 4 or 5 pivots. Learn. Like don't bring something into market that you're not proud of. And don't bring something to market that you feel like is a failure because you had to do it 3 or 4 or 5 times. Like go and do that. That's the point of talking to people. And so from ourselves, I think that you evolve and the mission to some degree even takes evolution over time with you. And our mission really now, like these days, from when it whence it was before it was really trying to give everybody a way to, sort of light their own path through the medium of their own choices. And I think that that emulates who we are as people and is an emulation of like what we do in everyday life. I think now beyond that, what we tried to facilitate and started with the community building, that from way back when now started to become the idea of how do we help people and facilitate them into becoming hubs. And that either comes as the people who use our products, that was come with the people who we, go and collect, combine our products together and, help even our users become hubs themselves through a number of our collective products and services. And now I feel like becoming a hub on Freefuse is even easier than ever before because you're going to be able to reach people with the new type of text message called RCS messaging. For those who don't know, that's going to be a new standard that's going to overtake MMS now. We have a way for you to reach out, through some of our partners through chat or through through a phone AI, through some of our partners. We have a way to, do things like, sales enablement through reading your CRM and telling you what your best deals are. And that's through another partner of ours. And we have ways to build in, formats from consultants that we brought in as partners as well and helping them to create custom GPTs and then actually integrating them with the data that's from Freefuse to actually go and help them power what's going to be answers from that GPT based on your data on platform. And so there's a way that we have really facilitated the idea of having the skill sets of a number of very, folks who really are, the best subject matter and experts in their field in some of these cases, and really working with them to help that end user just feel like they're going to be a part of that community space. But the person who is actually creating said communities are now going to be able to become the hub of what it is that they're trying to, be the hub for, whether it's a clinician who's trying to bring in information about medicine, whether it's somebody in the educational field who wants to rework how it is, how tests are being administered, and instead coming up with something that's more along the lines of applied knowledge. The way that we want to build that is to allow them to be central to what it is that they're doing and allow other folks to come in and layer on and build a much more successful way to build up that thing that they're trying to build up by simply getting other people to come in and contribute their expertise, their knowledge, and their feedback and their inputs. And I think ideas will become much more solid when people can actually take that level of self-reflection and growth that comes with spending a lot of time with other people.
What would you say is the biggest hurdle that you've seen people face to before they agree to come on board or adopt this the hub or build their hub? What What stops them from getting to that point?
That's a great question, and I really think it's actually a lot of their own personal previous experiences. The people that
Mhm.
have the largest trouble wrapping their head around this concept are the types of people whose stories begin with, "I don't know if I can really trust this because I've done something like this before and I got burned." It's always a story like that, and I always ask a lot of folks to expound upon it, like, just a little bit, not trying to fan any flames, but I wanna understand because I wanna, juxtapose who we are versus who some of those people they were and how you could even, tell, like, going into that, where were some of those telltale signs that you're dealing with people that, are untrustworthy. And, I can say until I'm blue in the face that like, my 3 major pillars of who I am are consistency and integrity of character, right? Like my goal is to never, kind of shortchange people on a deal and say, "Hey, I'm sorry that happened," right? Like, or hey, like if we mess something up, I want to, be very fair and be able to, compensate for like, hey, if you didn't get the things that you need, like we want to be able to make sure you get it right, or you can make sure you get a refund if that's the case, if that's something that you need to have. But I want to be able to have that as a pillar of who we are, and then, of course, the pillar of being able to connect people. I want people to inherently trust that I'm not just bringing you into a situation where you're feeling like you're disparaged or you're like on the losing end somehow of this, right? And I think that the major element is how fast can you get people to trust what you're saying. And I think being open and being somebody who really doesn't have I would say sort of the barrier of trying to keep, certain aspects or omit certain aspects. I think that there's a certain energy around that people, tend to pick up on and say, well, I don't really want to work with somebody who I feel like they're going to be, kind of, omitting certain things and telling me certain things. And it's just not all adding up. Right. And I can sense that too. There's a certain body language to it. There's a certain energy to it that you can feel. And so I like to always kind of, there was this thing I was taught a while back that I always felt was really profound, and they called it the open heart trust trigger, right? And so what they do is, being able to, be open. I always have my hands open. I always like to talk like this because I don't know, probably in some other life I was maybe somebody who like to, kind of spend their time like waving their hands around because that's like how I like to communicate. And so because of that, I always like to kind of, leave the heart open, right? And it's not just because I learned about, that I do it, but it's because I want to emulate that sense of sort of trust and, community and really just being, open to folks. Because obviously it's harder to interface with someone like this or all of that, even though people do all those cringy LinkedIn, kind of pictures where they like to show up like this. But I always like to be open like this. And I think a lot more people have been open to working with us because I have always said this from the time that I've been in, undergrad to now. Like for me, what you see is what you get. I'm going to, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it typically. And like more, the times that I, don't do something that I said I've been doing, it's just because I literally forgot. So it's not like it's an intentional. I say something and then I intentionally, don't do it. And if somebody says, "Hey, do you remember that, you were supposed to do this?" I'm probably going to end up doing it immediately because I feel bad. And so like I'm going to end up doing it. And so that's kind of how I operate. And a lot of people I think really vibe with like that level of authenticity and just trying to be the type of person like that's like that. And so that's what I feel like has been some of the areas of why even a stranger who I can go and connect with on LinkedIn, I've had tons of virtual coffee chats and I've ended up actually making some nice relationships and folks that I've brought on to other conversations now. And I've brought even people who've pitched me on ideas into to the table to other things that I'm working on. Right. Because to me, I've always believed that, if I'm able to help people get to where they want to go, inevitably to probably somewhere down the line, there's probably going to be some help that, they'll provide me, but it's not even about that. It's like I was able tangibly provide, some assistance to somebody. And all those things always just come around. But, I'm never expecting really anything in return for that. And, it's kind of philosophically who I wanted to be as like a giving person and a philosophical change that I made after reading things like Give and Take or The Go Giver and all of that stuff.
We are very aligned there. It's really beautiful hearing those words from someone, I guess, who's been successful. You've got a successful business. You've been working with so many different business owners, and in business, it's a very, I should say, masculine, patriarchal kind of space. And you're a very strong male talking about energy and heart and, integrity and authenticity. And I just want to say for the record, it's really refreshing. And thank you for being yourself and being so open and human.
Well,
I think,
right.
yeah.
And I just want to actually add something to that. You're talking about the masculine, the feminine, sort of, nature as well. And for me, I actually really like having even teams, right? And I don't do that as kind of like
Mm,
some level of quota. I do that because men and women actually, actually have different areas that they excel in, and I like having both of those perspectives. Like women, I've noticed have been excellent and detail oriented, and like I feel like I've been a more sort of like, I like to have, kind of like the idea of like I sort of think sometimes like too much in sort of like, kind of like outer space or like left field, and it's good to have somebody to reel you in and tell you, well, hey, we need to logistically have these specific steps. Now, I'm a process oriented person, so I understand that, and I've optimized to finding people who are going to say, well, hey, wasn't able to do this because, we didn't have these details. And then because of that, I learn from that. I take that and incorporate into our process. And now that much better the next time. Right. And that's only just a microcosm of what the benefit is to actually having, sort of evenly distributed teams. Because to me, there are various benefits to actually having, almost like a 50% split down the line. Because if I'm going to have somebody look at design work and even looking at from the lens of how much detail you're able to really look at stuff from, and I'm sure there's men who are incredibly well detail oriented, and there's women who are maybe more global in terms of the way that they think. And, it's kind of like a spectrum, right? But, if I were to look at something where I wanted the opinion of two people where I knew that one's strength was solidly with detail orientation and another's was more around the vast sort of like plethora of ideas that you could throw against the wall to see if something worked. I think I'd want both of them to be looking at the next age of products than I would just one or the other by themselves, right? And that's why I think leveraging the skill sets of different cultures and different people and different genders is actually incredibly important, because then you get a full and consistent experience, and then it's not really more token as much as it is like I legitimately just want to have all the different types of perspectives, because I think that actually just makes it better working environment.
couldn't agree more. So agree with that. And Mike, I'd love to know what has been the most surprising outcome of this new blend, creating this ecosystems and partnerships through the ecosystem. What surprised you the most?
Yep. What has surprised me the most has been that I never even had the imagination that there might be a time where I could work with some of the people that I respected as colleagues and as friends, but I never could get them to work for us because, well, they have their own ideas, right? So one of the most surprising thing and the greatest thing about this whole journey is that I got to start working with people that I always wanted to work with. And my literal goal after I learned about ecosystems and how powerful they could become was I tabbed a list of the 10 people that I had been talking to about partnering for like almost a year and a half. And now I had a tangible way to do so. I got to work right into, texting, calling, emailing, whatever I could do, and then having meetings with all of them and telling it to obviously the first 10 or so people who would even listen. And thankfully 8 of them jumped on. So I was like 8 for 10, I'm good, right? And so that was already, kind of a step in the right direction, and their willingness to speak with me, their willingness to be open to hearing what I said, and wanting to join up with this, even though they weren't sure what I was even talking about, admittedly down the road, which was kind of funny. They were willing to do this because I had actually always been, telling them that, hey, I think that there's ways for us to work together, and always trying to include them in ways that would be good in terms of webinars together, in terms of conversations together, in terms of whatever we could do. And now I've gotten it to a science where when someone joins up with us now, I have an entire workflow where I can give you all the resources and I can give you tons of stuff about the company through all of these tools that I've created because I made them internally and now I share them out with people. And now I've got that down to a science, but it would never have started without the first idea of finding people who you just really enjoy working with. And I think that no matter if you bring them on your team or you bring them into partnerships, the best way to work with people is to simply have the North Star of do you like being around them for long periods of time or not? And if you don't, it's not going to work out.
Yeah, love. I love that. I love that so much. Who? What's on the horizon for you in the next sort of 12 months? Let's just do a 12-month scenario because you're always creating and thinking. You're a builder. You're an engineer in your mind. What's coming up for you now?
Well, if I was actually on my computer and not on my lovely mobile device, because that's the only time I could actually get my graphic to show up, I would tell you this. I wish I could show you this giant actual growth document that I created that is legitimately created just for me to map out the next 14 to 18 months. I have entire tactics over there, and I've even hired folks to join our growth team. You know, a couple new hires in the domestic side, and then supplying them with some folks who are nearshore and offshore on the, sort of on the execution side as well. And so I literally, emulated our 24-hour dev cycle because we have domestic and offshore developers. So I now am consistently making stuff like literally every hour of every day now. But like I also now I'm going to have people who are going to be promoting and sharing information about what we do. We're going to have an ecosystem forum with these subject matter experts, fellow partners, and things like that. And now we're going to have a 24-hour cycle of that going on too. And my real excitement about this isn't just because, oh wow, it's going to be great. We're going to grow so much and blah blah blah. My excitement is that I made all of that myself. I actually took some of the best approaches and notes that I felt like were some of the best stories. I put them into the data around how to make a growth plan. And now I'm executing on it because I built that with one of my analysis tools. My whole curiosity and why I'm excited isn't simply because of the outcome. My excitement is the process because if I can get a repeatable process and that comes out of this and I know how to make that process go and it leads to the outcomes that I want or it leads to some progress and I can tune it, then I will now be able to perfect a process and tune it up and down to get the right results. And so for me, the excitement of this isn't necessarily, what is the success? My excitement is that the formula is going to work. And when the formula does finally find the most effective, repeatable way for me to do this, then it's pretty much just plug and play and then figure out how to make all the pieces fit. It's going to be that I can make something and tangibly get a result and know how to get there every single time. And to me, that's much more powerful than, oh, I had a success and I had really not that much idea on how that happened. Now I have an entire model.
That's brilliant. So exciting. I'm super pumped for you. I got a question, Mike. Who do you look up to?
That's a really great question. I would say that there are three individuals or three kind of like organizations actually. Funny enough, like two of them are actually in the local area. And if you were to, for folks who actually are fans of these teams even around the world, some might say, hey, you're being a homer about it. But like if you were to legitimately just watch how they structure and run their organizations and the people they put in power and the people that they bring into the organizations and the culture, you would actually really look at that as a case study of how to build an organization in such a more powerful way. And it's both, and I would say if I wanted to group two of them together, it's like both of the very successful Los Angeles teams. You have the Rams. I mean, obviously, I love the Lakers, but they kind of like are disjointed as an organization. I don't really look up to them. That's more of like a cool love situation. But like in terms of like the Dodgers and the Rams, you're run by some of the most intelligent, data-driven people that exist. You're run by, people who are maniacal about their preparation, who love the game and the things that they do, that they will do anything to like pretty much kind of prepare and plan for opponents and like prepare and plan their staff and the people who are over there like legitimately look like they really care about each other and there's a certain culture that's established there. They recruit really well, which is obviously the draft and free agency for them and in those sports. they do really well in terms of understanding how it is that they need to maneuver the relationships with players, understanding obviously there's the business end of it, but understanding there's a people end of it, and having a lot of people bring that loyalty and support of who they are, and more importantly, to really treasure the types of personalities and allowing them to be the best selves of who they want to be. So, like when I look at that, I would say I really look up to how it is that they really develop these organizations. I watch like how they go about their business and their planning and their preparation, and how they go and talk to the people after a win, how they go talk to people after a loss, how they go in and prepare for failure. What are the events that they bring as levity? What were the things that they did to plan for a run to the playoffs? What did they do to actually find the best talent they could? Like there's a lot to be learned when you strip away the sporting and the fan element, and from this purely organizational and talent development element area, they're also two of the best to actually develop talent. They get some of the talent, they develop them really well, and they get the most out of people that was one man's trash is their treasure, and they've done so consistently. And so that's the real beauty of like what they do. And it might be kind of put certain like organizations on a pedestal like that. But like I respect the ability to make a really, really good product, whether that's on the field, off the field, and how you explore. We're working with a number of folks who are going to be, very, maybe sometimes difficult because they are making like tens of millions of dollars in some of these cases, right? So how do you get everybody to buy in? How do you get everybody to really care for each other? And that really starts with the culture that you set. And it's from all of those elements that I've learned from, and being here and living here and seeing it on a regular basis. The results, speaks for themselves. But that's the beauty of this whole process, is like learning from successful people, and more importantly, emulating where I best can. And so that's why for me, I love watching the team, but I actually always watch the organization. I watch what they do and how well architected and they are. So yeah.
Thank you. I love that answer. And, it's really inspiring to hear what motivates you, but also who's inspired you and how you're using that to, create your future. It's brilliant. We are coming to an end, and I just love talking to you, Mike. I'm so grateful for you. Question: how can people get in touch with you?
Sure, sure. Well, you can easily reach out to me at my email. It's just Mike at freefuse.com. So FREEFUSE.com. You can also reach me via DM on LinkedIn. We will also be having a number of online forums. So if you would like to show up, I'm more than welcome it. I love seeing new people. I love meeting new people, and I love being able to support you in any way I can. So if you do see something on the Freefuse, company page, and you see stuff about me posting, and you want to get involved, you can shoot me a DM. You can comment on a post of mine. I'd love to see.
Thank you. It's just, I'm so grateful for you, Mike, for who you are, how you show up in the world, how you're helping people and impacting them. And thank you for being my friend on my journey, and you've been in my world for quite a few years now. And I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. Last thing, I'd love it if you could leave our listeners with one little kind of just a piece of advice or a tidbit, something that you might be learned along the way that you'd love to leave them with.
Absolutely. And if I may say that for 2025, what I would like anyone to really do is, what you should realize is what you might have been doing in the past that you feel like has somehow simmered out in terms of a tactic. I think that is your intuition telling you something that you really should explore something new. And what I would encourage you to do is find two or three or four of some of your most exciting and fun and easy to get along with collaborators. And I encourage you to try and put together one product or service or offering that you can all bring to market, and just have some fun with it. Just see where it goes. Get some people to try it out. Do your typical customer discovery process. Go through it, have fun, and most importantly, go out there and build something new and exciting. So that's pretty much what I would say. And hopefully they can go and merge those two things together. And of course, on a side note, if anybody would like to ever reach out to me, please do. And would love to see you. Love to get connected and go from there.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Mission Activated. If today's conversation resonated with you, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Remember, your mission matters. When you live on purpose, not only do you transform your own life, but you inspire others to do the same. Until next time, stay aligned, keep activated. I'll see you then.